Hello and welcome to a solo Friday afternoon live stream. Let me know if you can hear me okay. I have done all the things I think I should have done, but Con, my counterpart, is not here and he's usually doing things like double checking the audio. So yes, let me know if you can hear me. I'm going to sort of talk amongst myself for a minute. We hear you. Thanks, Phil. Okay, good. One person can hear me. That's excellent. So happy Friday. I've lost Con. He is away at the moment. He will be back next week, but I'm going back to the original. For those 6 of you who were with me for my very, very first live stream back in darker times, shall we call them. This is kind of like a hark back to that, so that'll be fun. So today we're talking photography top tips. I thought, why talk about gear? We will inevitably talk about equipment, but let's throw in some top tips. Maybe someone brand new who's not done a lot of photography before might get something out of this. We have such a talented bunch here that I thought we can all impart some knowledge probably. Thank you to Marvel for already kicking off the coffee fund. Super appreciated. And thank you, Len. I try. I won't tell anyone, Paul, that you are still at work watching this. Shh. No one grass up Paul. Where's the virtual secondhand department? That's right. So back in the day I had, because I was streaming from home, I had the secondhand department superimposed in the background. I don't have a green screen at work. Maybe we should get one. Hi, Vahan. Thank you very much as well. So I'm going to read off some of the ones that came in nice and early today because I thought, wow, we've already kicked off. Like as soon as I scheduled the stream this morning, there were people here. I will say I did have a guest actually lined up for today's live stream, but unfortunately he had to have some emergency dental work. That phone wasn't plugged in a minute ago. Hopefully someone will pick it up. Anyway, so I had to sort of think on my feet a little bit this morning because I had an entirely different live stream planned for you, but here we are. So I like Richard's first one, which was mine would be to learn to shoot manual because it helps you understand what's happening when you're shooting auto. And that's a really interesting thing. I think we're going to have a lot of people who will talk about kind of shooting on manual and understanding shutter speed and aperture. And I totally agree. Those are probably the most fundamental things that you can possibly find. We've quite recently taken on a couple of people to do some marketing for us who are not necessarily very well versed in the technical side of photography, but love the creative side of it. And they're sort of creating posts for us for social media and stuff. And I've been looking at their posts and obviously I have to vet a lot of them before they go out. And I'm going, wow, there are definitely things that people don't realize who are not necessarily photographers that they don't realize when you've been doing photography for as long as you have. So I think we'd be surprised at how many people don't understand the relationship between shutter speed, aperture and ISO. And I definitely think that that is a really good foundation because even if you don't shoot manual all the time, then you understand what the camera's doing when you shoot in auto and how to fix it if it's not doing what you want it to do. Con and I obviously share cameras quite a lot of the time, and sometimes I often shoot in manual, particularly if I'm doing macro work, and he usually shoots in aperture priority. So quite often he'll be like, oh, that's what's going on. But he can very quickly understand that that's what's going on. Whereas if he didn't know those things, we'd be struggling. Andy says, top tip, stop watching YouTube. Well, you must continue to watch this YouTube channel, but said, and stop reading forums and just get out and shoot. It's amazing that when one actually takes images or records footage, the world seems brighter and more fun. And that is very, very true. I think that I was having this conversation with someone the other day. I think that sometimes we get so much information inflow that then we kind of forget that reality is different to what's on our screens. So I totally agree with that, Andy. The process of photography is a joyful thing. So taking more photographs is definitely a top tip. Now, a couple of people posted this tip, and I think this is fantastic. This has become something that I am definitely going to do because I've never done this before. So Richard said this was his second top tip, and then someone else posted another one a minute later. But he said, have a bit of paper on the door or wall where you store your camera with your contact details. Take a picture of it before you go out. It tests the camera and identifies it if lost. So if you're out on a trip and you take a picture, then someone can always find your contact details, which I think is a really, really good tip. But going one step further, let's see if I can find it in amongst all these comments. Am I going to be able to find the person that said this? Maybe not. David, there you go. He said, I use 9 different Nikon film cameras, and my first exposure is always a piece of paper with which camera and film I use, then create albums on Lightroom by camera. This way I always know what I use. This is brilliant, David. My mind was blown when I read this. I was like, of course, that makes total sense. So what I tend to do is once I've finished the roll of film, I then go to my little numbers /Excel spreadsheet, and I put in what camera I used, what the film was, and what lab I sent it off to. And then when it comes back, whether I had it scanned by the lab or whether I did it myself. The problem with that is that sometimes when you've got a lot of film cameras on the go, if you've got a film in it already and you are halfway shooting the film, then you maybe don't remember what you put in there. That's what I struggle with. Not all of my film cameras have little windows on them. So I have quite a lot of point and shoots that they're just, you put the film in and you then can't remember what film you were using, which I haven't figured out a way around that. Maybe I need to do it when I start the process rather than at the end of the process. But anyway, David, I think that's a brilliant tip. I will be doing that from now on, either as my first shot or my last shot on the roll. So that was very, very good. Now, John had a couple. I liked his second tip. He said, my tip is never believe one review of a piece of kit. Always find more than one review, and if possible, go and try it for yourself. And we tend to, I think, hold with that as well. We obviously review a lot of equipment on this channel, and I will be the first person to say that sometimes we get a sample variant, or, the situation that we've had to use a piece of equipment in was not necessarily the perfect intended use for that item of equipment. Sometimes we're limited as to where we can travel to, or the weather, or sometimes we only have equipment for a day and we've got to work around that. So I agree, as many reviews as you can without driving yourself mad, of course, to kind of get a general consensus about something, because a photographer that, let's say, normally does architecture photography, then reviewing a wildlife lens won't necessarily give you the verdict that you want if you're a wildlife photographer. So take all these things in moderation. And he said his second tip is never to take your plastic cards into a camera shop. Unless it's Grays of Westminster. Before I forget, please do give the stream a like if you haven't already. I've got about 170 people here. Thank you for being here to listen to me waffle for the afternoon. Please do hit that like button. It's super duper helpful. We're doing pretty well on subscribers. We're at like 20,500 now. I would love it to just keep snowballing, but we have to just keep putting out content that is enjoyed by you all and is useful to you as well. Sometimes I think we do that better times than others, but we're working on it. I'm always appreciative of your emails. When you send emails over to us that say, oh, maybe you'd like to do a video about blah, or really enjoyed this video, could you do more like that? Things like that. That feedback is super helpful. We read the comments. We don't always have time to answer the comments because we are very busy people, but we do our best, and the feedback is immensely helpful. So if you ever send an email, believe me, it will always be welcomed. So that was John's top tips. So bring your credit cards to Grays, but no other camera shop. I'm just amending that one for you, John. Bjorn has a great practical one. He said, if you're going for a hike, take a 2-meter cord with you, attach it to a tripod screw, and step your foot on the top and pull it straight, and you just obtained a nice lightweight monopod. And I had to, when I was reading this, I was trying to think it through, but I understand essentially you've got you're sort of stabilizing a tripod screw with a cord. It's really interesting. I don't do a huge amount of hiking and take tripods with me, so that was an interesting one. So thank you, Bjorn, for your top tip. Okay, so then stop watching YouTube videos on how to do things. I don't know. I have learned a lot from YouTube. I think that that obviously not everyone knows what they're talking about, but I think that there are a lot of really good resources on YouTube. You just have to pick your sources. So, but thanks, John. Nigel said top tip, water first, then milk. Yes, you don't put your milk in before your water when you're making a cup of tea. You just don't do that. Ian said, don't try to buy a DK17M on the internet. Yes. And Roy said, best tip, watch Grays every week. Yes. I agree with those, most definitely. Hello, Matt. Thank you for joining. Sorry, I'm a bit behind on the chat. I'm just catching up here. But it's great to have you here. Thank you for your support as well. Matt's just popped out a video on the Z8 and Z9 firmware updates, as well as 180 to 600 shipping and availability. I know that people are going to ask, so I'm going to tell you anyway. Z8, Z9 firmware updates we'll talk about on the Nikon report next week. They're small, mainly bug fixes and a couple of other bits and pieces. But if you want the full explanation, Matt has it on his video. In the UK, at least, we've been given a tentative delivery date of the 31st of August. Now, based on how popular this lens is, I know how many we're getting, and the people who are getting one from the very small first batch have already been contacted, because as you can probably imagine, we get asked pretty much every day when the 180-600 is appearing. But I'm hoping that we'll get another batch very soon. So when you need shipping updates, obviously I'm the person in the shop that knows all those things. And if I don't have the information, I can't tell you, but I can tell you that we know that there are a small number coming in next week, and some people will get some, but not many, unfortunately. And I think we were kind of all expecting that. Paul said he's just been to the shop to pick up his Gold Dust 1.4Z teleconverter. Yes, very nice. Finally starting to see a couple of those coming through. And John said, stop trying to watch more than 3 YouTube live channels at once. I think watching 3 channels once, a bit like watching 3 TV channels at once. I don't know how you could get anything out of it. So totally get you on that one. Hello to everyone who said that they're all over the world. Andy said, okay, so, Andy's answering Royce. That's fine. I won't read that comment. I'm trying to look out for the QQQs, but no one's put QQQs so far. So bear with me. Jay has an interesting tip. He says, my top photography tip: when feeling uninspired, I give myself a photography assignment to complete within the next 2 days. Could be anything: architectural, landscape, weather, portrait, etc. This is brilliant. This is kind of what we wanted to do with our photography challenge, where we intended to just get you out taking pictures, or indoors taking pictures, or whatever, just to kind of step away from focusing too much on the gear and a little bit more on the doing of the taking the pictures. And I think that this is a really lovely way to do it. What a lot of people used to do back, actually very early days when I started working here, back in 2008 to sort of 2012, I remember over that period of time, a lot of people were doing 365 challenges where they had to take a photo every single day for a year. Or if they couldn't commit to that, it was a 52 challenge. So it was 1 photo a week. Or if they couldn't do that, it was a 12 for 12. So then it would be 1 photo a month. And obviously, depending on how your schedule is, what your work is like, whether you do photography just occasionally once every so often as a hobby, or however you approach photography, this is a really lovely way to do it. I haven't seen much done since then. I don't see many people doing those sort of like 365-day projects. But I love the idea of giving yourself that discipline. Like, I must take a picture every single day just to keep it fresh. And I know artists do a lot of this as well. And I think that that's sometimes it's quite an easy way, even if the purpose is to get you out of your sort of funk or your moment of uninspiration, and then you're out of that, and then you don't have to commit to it, but it kind of keeps you accountable. So I think that that works really well. Let me know if anyone else has done that, because I would love to hear it if so. Right. Chat has refreshed for me now, so I can see what's going on. Thank you to Dennis for a cookie with the coffee, to Paul for your contribution to the coffee fund, to Ian, and to Terry. Thank you very much. As he said, like old times pre-con, just you with us watching. Yeah, exactly. It was just a conversation between me and you. That's how it was, and that's how it is this week. It's like going back to the really good old days. Okay, so Nightsbringer gave a response to the reviews thing. He said, when reading reviews, understand what they're on about. and decide, do I actually care that much? If it's all pixel peeping and you couldn't care less, don't let it put you off. And I think that is actually a really good point. There are sometimes when I read reviews of cameras, when I was sort of looking for the right medium format camera for myself before I bought the Pentax, I would look at reviews and go, okay, so they say this, but does that bother me? And not really, because I'm not doing that type of photography. Or, oh, they say that the problem is this. Well, I'm not going to put myself in that position, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. And then other things, it was like, yeah, that would cause me an issue, so therefore I won't buy that camera. So I agree. You have to kind of relate everything to yourself and your own needs as well. Ivan says, top tip. Oh, this is an interesting one. Top tip for the Z2470 2.8. If you're using manual focus, you can set the camera to remember your focus distance. So if you need to switch off the camera for any reason, the camera won't default to infinity. This is the case with quite a few Z lenses, and it's a very, very useful feature. I cannot actually tell you whether all cameras have that ability, but I know most of the pro bodies have that ability, so that if you turn the camera off, it doesn't reset the focus itself. It's one of those interesting things you don't think about if you're using a DSLR, because you don't have the focus by wire. It's not electronic, it's a mechanical focus. So the camera is wherever you left the focus at. Very useful if you're in a hide waiting for long periods of time and you don't want the focus to reset itself or the focus distance to reset itself. So there you go. David's top tip is in portrait, make sure the nearest eye is in focus. This counts for, I would say, animal portraits and wildlife as well. Nearest eye is the one that you want in focus. 100% agree with that. And Andy said, top tip, hit the like button. Yes, thank you. Sam said, read the roll of film. Yeah, that's a really good tip. Once shot a 24 roll, had to use up the excess shots left, ended up wasting a 36 roll. Yes, the problem is when you have a camera that you can't see what the roll is inside. I have like 4 of those cameras where I'm going, don't remember what I put in there. And I usually try and use a camera to the end, but sometimes you want one for color, one for black and white, one for ISO 400, one for ISO 800, etc. So yeah, it happens to the best of us, Sam, don't worry. So Dennis and someone else said earlier, but I'm sorry I didn't read this out earlier, but it was a kind of similar tip, but it just said, Dennis said a good starting point is take a shot on auto, have a look at the info, then go to manual and adjust those auto settings to your preference. And I've taught a lot of different age groups of photographers, starting from, I mean, my kids' school back in the day used to do a photography competition, and one of the prizes was a lot of kids won, but one of the prizes was that you would get a photography lesson. So I used to teach kids from like the age of 6 or 7 all the way up to obviously full-blown adults, but in that school up to about 11-year-olds. And you from all walks of life, if someone doesn't know anything about photography, you can always tell them, put it on auto and just pay attention to the numbers. Obviously 5 and 6-year-olds aren't going to pay attention to those. When you're teaching 5 and 6-year-olds photography, my top tip is just at the end of the lesson, try to get them to take a photo of someone without chopping off their head. because that was always what I would tell. We'd use the big fancy word composition, and I'd have to clear it with them and tell them what it meant. And then at the end of the day, if they took a photo of one of their friends or of me and they hadn't, chopped off the head, I was happy. That was a result for that little class. So, take these things in baby steps. Right. So Lowell said, when using a tripod, turn off any vibration control on your camera to ensure sharp images, unless you're shooting in quite windy conditions. This is a really interesting tip, actually. VR is one of those kind of, almost misunderstood subjects. The rule of thumb with VR used to be, if you were on a tripod, you turn it off. If you're shooting at a shutter speed above, let's say, thousandth of a second, turn it off. I've actually seen Simon Stafford, very exceptional technical writer, tutor, teacher, etc., engineering education. He said, 500th of a second is when he tells people to turn it off. I've always kind of pushed the limit a little bit more, but if you are on a stable surface, then essentially the lens is having this motor compensate for movement that isn't there. So I agree. Do turn off the VR. Another thing that I've been seeing quite a lot recently, we've had loads of cameras come in and lenses come in and people say, oh, the VR is not doing what it's supposed to do. So I found something out. Every day is a school day. I found something out the other day from Nikon School. Not Nikon School, I beg your pardon. Nikon Tech Support. The lenses, the Z lenses, not only, but specifically the Z lenses in sport mode have this odd kind of image shift sometimes. And you can avoid that by turning off sport mode, but it's actually just an extra level of compensation. So we've sent stuff to them and said, look, the VR moves in the viewfinder and that's weird, right? And then they said, actually, that's normal. So if you don't want that to happen, then turn off sport mode because sport VR is what's doing it. So this is kind of interesting. There are different levels of VR where the motor will move more than others. But we've also seen it with lenses that don't have that option where there is a slight image shift. So if you're on a stable surface, you can turn VR off. If you're shooting at 500th of a second, you aren't going to get handheld camera shake anyway because, I mean, your hand is not going to shake that much. It's not going to shake enough for the camera to see it. So I think that that's a great tip. Larry says, once you figure out the easy technical stuff, learn about composition. Some people do it the other way around. Some people go composition first and then learn the technical stuff. I know a lot of photographers who've made a lot of money taking pictures that don't know any technical stuff at all. And that's fine. You know, that's totally fine. If you've got the creative eye, you're already halfway there, I would say. The technical stuff is important, but sometimes we can get so technical that we miss the art side of photography, and it is an art form. It's a science, yes, but it's also an art form. So I think that's either way you decide to do it, it's good to balance out the composition and the artistry with the technical stuff. Marcus says, know your gear and what you really need. Also, your first camera is usually not the perfect one. So this is a good point. I don't know how many of you in the chat here today still have your first camera or have never upgraded your camera. The first camera that you bought is still the camera that you use today. Obviously, for newer photographers, that's probably not a wild and far-fetched idea. But I know for a lot of us who have been taking pictures for a very long time, I could not count, I wouldn't dare count the number of cameras that I've gone through over the years. So I'd just be interested to know. I'd be genuinely interested to know if anyone's still using their first ever camera. Ian said, I was told years ago, don't be scared of using higher ISOs. I think that, yeah, if you need to. ISO is there for a reason. It's a tool, and particularly with newer cameras now, I mean, they're so good in low light. You do get noise, yes, you can fix a lot of that now. I've been seeing some really interesting results with people using, what is it? Is it Topaz? Denoise, I think is what it's called, and just like stripping out the noise there. I mean, I don't know how I feel about that, but I do appreciate that sometimes it's necessary, particularly if you're doing commercial photography and you've been given an impossible assignment and it's like, I had to shoot at these shutter speeds. But as someone said, let me just see, someone said later, learning lighting is really honestly the best thing that you can do. And lighting, Seth will attest to it. I actually don't know if Seth's here. Oh, yes, you are. There you are. Seth will attest to the fact that lighting is just 100% key. You're not going to take any pictures if you don't have any light. And if you don't have a basic understanding of light, it's going to be tough. If I'm buffering a little bit, apparently there is someone, I don't know, watching Ahsoka on Disney Plus downstairs. I don't know. There's something going on with the internet, but such is life. David suggests that I should tape the cover of the film box on the back of the camera. Yeah, I might do that. Just it's not as pretty, is it, David? Seth said, thanks to phones, kids are learning the basics of composition organically, younger and younger. They start creating and ingesting images earlier and earlier now. And that's totally true. I think that as our discussion said, the discussion that we did at the beginning of the week was so interesting. Con and I filmed that last week before he went on holiday, and he said, what should we do as our point of discussion? And we'd kind of just done the Nikon report, and I was like, well, maybe we should talk about this. So it was such an interesting thing to see people kind of getting really excited. I don't know if excited is the right word. Passionate in the comments of that video about smartphones and cameras living side by side, and everyone seemed to have just a really intense opinion about it, which I thought was hilarious, and I love it. I love the passion of this group. I think it's great, but it is true. We've gone through these evolutions of going like, oh, smartphones are just going to destroy digital cameras, and then we've got other people saying, well, no, because digital cameras serve a different purpose to smartphones. And you get other people like, well, I use both and they live side by side with no problems. But I do think that composition is an interesting one that people learn, because even with, you know, your iPhone or your Android or whatever, with the grid lines that you can superimpose on there, with all the kind of the tools, the different lenses that are now built into phones, people do learn faster, and they learn what works and what doesn't work, and they're not afraid of the consequences, because if the shot is rubbish, they can just get rid of it, or they just keep it in their camera roll forever. And then they have to just keep spending more money on cloud storage. But I definitely think that's true. Like, there's definitely more people learning composition before technical settings these days. Okay, so Juve says, use your smartphone first to frame and check possible final results from your Nikon. I think that's quite cool. I think that's actually quite an interesting idea to do that. Andy said, you mean normal, VR normal, not normal VR sport. I don't know which round I said, but yes, sport mode is designed for panning. I will find for you, Andy. I will find the email and I will send it to you so you can tell me why they said VR Sport. But no, Nikon support said VR Sport if you don't want the sport mode on. And that's on the lens itself. We were referring to a very specific long telephoto lens that was causing this jerky issue. And Nikon said, there's nothing wrong with the lens. It's just in VR Sport mode, it's going to judder more. And I was like, why? Why though? So there you go. But yes, Nigel, as you say, sport mode is generally designed for panning. So I don't understand why it would do that, but apparently it's normal. So fine, we're not going to panic. We're just going to go with what they say. Vince, thank you so much for your contribution to the coffee fund. Said every so often, find the best light, compose, then wait for the picture to come to the light. The number of times we've done this, particularly recently, like in England at the moment, we have... The days are getting a little bit shorter, but there's certain times in the afternoon and in the late morning where the light is just magical. It's absolutely magical. And sometimes you find a spot and you go, this would be a great shot, but it's not there. It's not going to look exciting. And then you just wait for the sun to break through the clouds. And then you're like, that is the shot. And Con and I will quite often do that. Sometimes we'll be like, oh yeah, no, okay. What do? Do we wait? And then we might wait for a few minutes. If it takes too long, we're like, and then the light comes and then we go. Anyway, so it's a whole thing. And I totally agree. Waiting for the light is so important. Jay says, regarding VR for Z lenses, read the instruction booklet for that lens. Helpful tips are provided there. I 100% wish more people would read the instruction manuals for their lenses. I totally agree. I just 100% agree. Instruction manuals are really dry reading, like really, really dry reading, but actually very, very useful. And there's quite a lot of, I think they've gotten better in recent years as well. Albert still has his 1982 Nikon FG. Are you still using it, Albert? That's cool. Vahan still has his F3. Andy still has his first camera, but uses his D200. John has, oh no, that's a different conversation. You guys talking amongst yourselves, just confusing me, but it's totally fine. I'm very, very happy. Phil said, first camera was 60 years ago, don't still have it. Well, that's fair enough. I don't still have my first camera. I wish I did, but I don't. So Mandula says, been using my D3300 for 5 years as my first ever camera, still using as is. That's brilliant. And you know, those entry level DSLRs, those 3000, 5000 series cameras, Nikon sold so many of those, and they really hold their value. Someone was having a little moan at me today about us not having many DSLRs in our secondhand stock. And someone else was moaning about it a couple of days ago. It was like, you don't have much in your secondhand stock. We have lots of cameras in our secondhand stock, but DSLRs specifically at the moment, during summer, it's always quieter on secondhand camera sales. Like, I find that people are less likely to sell their stuff in the summer, mainly because they're out there using it. It's not sitting in the back of a cupboard. They're out on holiday. They're taking shots with their DSLRs. And then come autumn/winter, we'll see way more come in. And also, another point, in fact, just to defend the stock situation, is that we haven't had a new camera release now since the Z8. And the people that wanted the Z8, that wanted to trade in, they did that. Been there, done that. The people who are sort of on the fence will trade in eventually, but they probably aren't in such a hurry. So we have that situation as well. But cameras like the 3000 and 5000 series, you might find a few on eBay or, I don't know, somewhere else, one of the other dealers. But we've never seen a huge influx of those smaller cameras. I tend to think that people hang on to them, and they're very good cameras. So that's probably why. Champagne Sumo said, Becky needs to write spicy manuals. Yes. Yeah, I'll write spicy versions just for you. Seth, thank you very, very much. So coffee is already on me before I even get to your shop in November. That's amazing. Thank you so much. We are very much looking forward to Seth. In case you didn't get the memo, Seth is coming with Joe McNally in November to the UK. They're doing a portrait photography workshop with Nikon School. It's a 2-day workshop. You can book it on Nikon School's website. It's going to be so exciting. I'm trying to figure out how we can get like a sneaky ticket for that so that we can be there for that. But anyway, either way, Seth is going to come to the shop and it's going to be fantastic. Randall, thank you also for your contribution to the Coffee Fund. Said, I still have my first film Kodak Electrolyte 10 film camera, but unfortunately not been using it lately. Need batteries and need to finish the film. I'm going to Google what that is afterwards. I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not going to be able to multitask. But that's really interesting. And I'm really glad that you still have your first ever film camera. I know that, I know quite a few people who have beautiful collections of cameras. We've been sent quite a few pictures recently. There's a gentleman, I think his name is George, sent me a beautiful picture of his collection of Nikons. I've had a few other people send me just a full list of all the cameras that they have, not just Nikons, but everything else. And it's just, anyway, it's really interesting to see people keeping their cameras throughout the generations. If you can, and I'm one of those people that's always had to sell my camera to fund another camera. So I've never been able to keep all my cameras, but I think that that's a beautiful thing if you can do that. And if you've got the space for it as well. Nightspringer said, top tip, always keep the box your camera came in. You never know when you'll need it for something. That's interesting. That's very interesting. We used to recommend that. I don't know if that's still so much of a case, but definitely worth keeping for the first good 6 months or so, just for the simple reason that if you need to send it back or anything like that, you've got it. It's very important. Sam said cameras capture light. Lighting is important. Yeah, exactly. It definitely is. Jan said my first camera was a Kodak Instamatic 126. I think I saw it in a museum recently. Listen, I saw an iPod in a museum recently. I felt so old. I was like, what? What is this doing here? I had an MP3 player before iPods were a thing, when it was like a USB stick, but with 28 meg space on it or something like that. And you could put music on there. It was just an absolute revelation. I think I've missed someone. Jay has their first camera, which is a Nikon FE. A couple of people's first camera was a Kodak disc camera, which is a little bit out of the left field. That's interesting. Here we go. Thank you, Chris, for your contribution to the Coffee Fund. Seen that. So Bubba still has D300S, D7100, D500, D850, now Z9. No, it wouldn't hold a candle to Gray's collection, but, it's nice that you still got all your cameras. Ivan said keeping your box proves that your gear isn't stolen when you want to sell it on. Yeah, we've never really had that issue. I mean, as people who have bought a lot of cameras over the last sort of 15, 16 years, if someone doesn't have the box, we don't automatically think that it's stolen gear. Our minds don't go that way. Obviously, if the person kind of seems like they don't know what they're talking about and the stuff is in a camera bag that, you know, you can kind of get a vibe for these things. I don't quite know how to explain it. It's kind of like a spidey sense. So you can tell if something has been stolen. But we also do, the camera dealers look after each other. So if equipment has been stolen from a dealer, usually they will send this sort of round robin email to say, look, this equipment's been stolen. Please keep an eye out for it. Here's the police report numbers, etc. So we try and make sure that that's not such an issue. But yeah, it is definitely difficult in other parts. I know, like in other parts of London, even not just in other countries, stolen camera gear being sold into camera shops. We're a little bit more prestigious, so I don't think that would necessarily happen with us. But it has once or twice. Someone's come in and you've gone, you just took this out of someone's car boot, didn't you? Like you can kind of feel it, you know? Don't know if that makes any sense. So here we go. I'm trying to find, need 100 more people to hit the like button. Thank you, Andy. Andy's there waving the flag for hitting the like button, which is great. Roy, I like your tip. Keep the peel off protective paper on the back screen to annoy everyone. I know people who do this, who just leave it on. These days, you can buy very good protective film screens for the back of your digital camera. You don't need to keep the one on that has all the stickers on it and stuff like that. Don't know how anyone uses their cameras with those things still on the back. But the stick-on covers, I think, are a really, really good thing. Tempered glass ones are kind of interesting because we've had people put a tempered glass one on their camera. It's then got a little chip in it. And when you try and peel it off, you actually can't get it off. You need a hairdryer. You need like surgical spirit. It's a whole operation to just try and get these screen protectors off. So it's tricky. So I would say just the regular film ones, unless you're in the habit of dropping your camera. The little peel on film things are totally fine. Vahan said congrats to Matt for 600 vids on the YouTube channel. That's amazing. I was looking today, we've done 560 on hours, and I was thinking, what? But we're two people, and Matt's just one person, so that's amazing. Super congratulations to you, Matt, for that. Andy said boxes have value after a while. Yes, they do, particularly on much earlier equipment. We sometimes end up having to cull the boxes that we have. So if you're ever looking for a spare box for an item of equipment, just drop us an email. We might well have one because, you know, limited space. Space is a little bit of a premium, I would say, in London town, particularly in a shop of this size. So we can't always keep all the boxes if they don't have equipment that's attached to them. Where they come from, I couldn't tell you, but it does happen. I love Lowell's lovely piece of advice. Said, buy your Nikon equipment from a reputable dealer, such as Grace Westminster. Exactly. Yes, I do think that buying your equipment from somewhere that's, let's say, traceable is quite important. Obviously, you can buy stuff off, you know, auction sites and things like that. And there's a huge amount of buyer protection in place now so that it's not such an issue. But yeah, if you want aftercare, if you want, you know, warranties and extended warranties and things like that, it is important to buy from a dealer, I would say. And I will be completely honest with you, being a dealer of any kind of retail outlet at the moment is very, very tough. So if you can support your small businesses, it is immensely appreciated, because the people that are in the shop, that are doing the day-to-day, that are servicing the customers, you know, that it's not all sort of sunshine and roses. It can be very, very difficult. So if you can support your small businesses, I'm 100% all for promoting that as much as possible. Right, here we go. So gosh, David said, I had an F5 and a light meter stolen. The cops were shocked. I had all the serial numbers, not that it helped to get it back. Yeah, I think we talked about insurance a few weeks ago, Con and I think some of you had some really interesting to sort of tips and insights on the subject of insurance. But as someone who's recently just inventoried all their camera equipment for insurance and then put serial numbers down, it is useful to have that data. So if you have a lot of equipment, do somehow keep a record of it, whether it's for insurance or if you don't have photographic insurance, then just for your own peace of mind, I think it's well worth doing. So J-Rod asked, should Nikon make a security code or a key to unlock the camera, rendering it useless if stolen? This is an interesting concept, a little bit like when you have a phone. I imagine a bit like with smartphones now, there are going to be ways to circumnavigate that passcode or that face detection. I know that they try and lock it down as much as possible, but there's always going to be, unfortunately, unscrupulous criminal people who are going to try and find a workaround for it. If it were a really, super tight system, I would say even thumbprint recognition would be a good place to start. That may seem weird, but you unlock your phone or your laptop with your finger. Touch ID for cameras, I think, would be fantastic, because obviously once you've turned the camera on, you can hand it to someone else to use it. But at least if you've got fingerprint ID or something, then when someone steals a camera, there's not much they can do about it. It's just an idea. I mean, it's very pie in the sky. I don't think anyone's going to develop that anytime soon, but I think it's a good idea. Terry says 2 of my childhood cameras was a Boots 126. Did Boots make cameras? I didn't know that. I mean, apart from point and shoot throwaway cameras, that's amazing. And a Diana Snappy. Both plastic, and took 120 roll film, and I still have them. That is so interesting. Terry, if you've still got them, send a picture to the email, the media email. I would love to see those. That's really, really cool. Sam and I obviously are great minds that think alike, because she said exactly the same thing. Fingerprint recognition. The camera won't fire until the finger is on the trigger. I think like unlocking the camera, because different people might want to share a camera for a studio or something, I could imagine that would be a bit annoying. But if only one person can use it and it's fingerprint ID, but I do think it's a good idea. As the executioner said, I wouldn't want to enter a pin every time I switch the camera on. That might be a bit annoying. But if it's something that you can't that doesn't take more than a second, you put your thumb on the camera grip when you turn it on or something, I think that would be really good. David said my iPhone SE doesn't have PIN or passcode. No one wants it. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, iPhone thievery is probably a thing that's relegated just to the latest models, but it also depends on what country you're in and a lot of things. I mean, yeah, anyway, I don't think I'll go there on this particular afternoon chat, but even a few years ago, my brother-in-law went back to my husband and my brother-in-law's home country, which is Venezuela. And he had an ancient BlackBerry. I mean, like the oldest back when BlackBerries were still usable. And it was right before BlackBerries were about to be discontinued. And even then he was told by one of their relatives, do not take your phone out in public because, it will be stolen in a second. And he was going, but it's like 100 years old. It doesn't matter. So yeah, there are some phones that are less desirable than others, but I think it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Some things will just go because they can. And cameras are a big, there are parts even of London where I go, like, I wouldn't want to take my expensive camera gear out here. It's definitely better than it used to be, but still, one has to be careful out there, I think. Vahan still has I don't even know what Nextel is. Is it American? Flip phone. But flip phones are coming back in. In the UK, we've got a couple of brands doing flip phones now. So it's very like early noughties Matrix. And I'm kind of here for it. I love it. Some people know what Nextel is, so that's great. I don't. So Jeff still has his very first 35mm camera, which is the Sheikah MC Electro 35. And the other one. That's really cool. I'm really pleased that a lot of people still have their original cameras, because I kind of thought, a bit like me, everyone would just trade them in. But if it depends on how long you've been doing photography for, I suppose. Right. So yes, Nightspringer said, I genuinely wish there was some registry for lenses and camera bodies to shove your serial numbers into if it's been stolen. There is actually, and it's called, I think it's called findmycamera.com. And because we've had this come up, like you can put your camera serial numbers into a database. So if you've got them, obviously, write them down first. And you can put them into a database. And then that is a database that can be used all over the world, because an old, I think it was a D300, was like dropped off a bridge somewhere in Spain, and it was recovered, and the serial number was put into this Find My Camera thing. And the owner, who had been traveling to Spain, I don't know if it was Spain, it could have been another country, someone else might know the story, the owner, who was from a completely different place, had typed in the serial number to this Find My Camera website, and they reunited them with the camera. And believe it or not, although the camera should have been defunct, they had like the PCB board replaced, and then it worked perfectly. So really, really interesting. It's actually quite a tool to use. Okay, Seth said, I hit up eBay and found all the models I had first for each year of my career and rebought them. That's super cool. It's kind of a milestone for me. I feel made it long enough to acquire back, which is something that we see quite a lot at Grays, I would say. Like, people will occasionally come in and say, oh, I used to have, or also they didn't used to have, but they used to lust after a Nikon F3 or even a Nikon F. You know, they say, I really wanted one of these and I couldn't afford it. So I had an EM, or I had a Nickelmat, or whatever they had instead. And they will buy the camera because the camera that they always wanted, or they'll buy back the old camera because they go, oh, I really wish that I could put my hands on this again. I think there's something very nostalgic about, I mean, photography in general. You don't get the same thing, speaking as a visual artist, you don't get the same thing with like paintbrushes, for example. You don't go, oh, I had this great paintbrush in high school or like in college, and I should buy that paintbrush again. It's usually, I think that photography is very different. There's something so nostalgic about it. Occasionally you get it with musical instruments. If anyone's a musician here, it's very quick and painful to reacquire all the guitars that you used to have eons ago, or whatever else you were playing with. Maybe you're not a guitarist, but I think that cameras definitely do it for some people more than others. Seth said, Adorama equals actual humans. There you go. I know that's in response to some other comment, but also makes the point of, if you're buying your cameras from somewhere, buy them from actual humans. It does make a really big difference. So, okay, now back to the tips, because I think we went off the rails somewhere and went on, did a tour around the world and came back. So Lowell says, to learn composition, start with longer focal lengths, such as 50mm and longer. For wide-angle framing, composition is harder to master. This is a really interesting point, and I wonder if having the nifty 50 as your first lens is one of the reasons why that works so well, is because the 50 kind of forces you into a certain look and field of view when you're composing. In terms of like tips for first camera setup, my personal first tip is always, when someone is buying a camera, like they come into the shop and they say, I've never done photography before, or I'm just branching into photography, and there's someone that I can see is going to take it seriously and is going to get the bug and want to do it properly, I always recommend a prime lens. I say, get a 50, or if you're using DX, get a 35 and just start there, because you can totally have the kit lens. Kit lens will probably cost like 50 quid or something. So get it anyway, but try and use the prime as much as possible, because that will force you to think when you are taking pictures. It will force you to move your body. It will force you to rethink the way that you compose rather than just zooming in and out. And that has worked a huge amount for a lot of new and budding photographers. So I think that's, anyway, that's my tip. Thought I'd just throw mine in there. Now, Nick Can said, before I start to photograph any outdoor events, I take 4 photos from corners of the pitch and see if there's any difference in light, especially under floodlights, so I know what to expect before. This is a really practical tip. I think that's brilliant. It's never occurred to me to do something like that, but for outdoor events, that makes total sense. I do a similar thing, although I haven't done one in a good long while, but do similar things for sort of like weddings and events. I'm shooting an event next weekend, and I will use that tip, so thank you. But indoor venues as well. Sometimes you station yourself in one corner and you don't realize that actually from another side of the room or another corner, the lighting hits different, and it actually works really well, particularly if you're dealing with speakers or something going up front. So that's a really good tip. Russell said, my tip is to get close to your subject. Put up those tellies and pull out your wide or ultra wide, unless you're shooting wildcats. Yeah, maybe don't do that if you're dealing with something dangerous. But yeah, getting up close, I think, is also quite a nice way to mix things up a little bit. Sometimes people, I think, get stuck with just shooting from the same angle all the time, and it can work the other way. Sometimes you can always be close up to things, but I think when we go out on a shoot, for example, and I'll find a corner and I'll be like, I could take 100 photos here. There's all these different things that I can take pictures of, but that's me getting nice and close. Whereas Con might look at it from a different angle of like, oh, I would rather have this wide angle. My other tip would probably be, if you can, find someone that you can go out and take pictures with. Sometimes photography can be a very solitary pastime, I would say. And sometimes that's great. If you're an introvert and you don't want to hang out with people, that's not a problem. And then just come here and talk from your keyboard at me. But also I think it's really nice to even find one person or a small photography group, or, once in a blue moon, go out and take pictures with someone else, because you will learn things from each other always. And even just in the fact that you can stop every few minutes and take a picture and the other person won't get annoyed, that alone can be a small blessing. So I think that's probably another tip that I would give, is shooting buddy. Russell said that's a good one. Having a shooting buddy is always nice. It's a good way to see different perspective in the moment. And I definitely agree with that. As Sam said, find a like-minded group of enthusiasts that encourage in a decent way. And I think encouragement is important, because photography can be, for want of a better word, it can be very gatekeeped. Gatekeeped, is it a verb? I don't know. It is now. I'm a writer, should know these things. And I think that finding a group that you're comfortable to work with, who will encourage you, and obviously you don't want someone to constantly say, oh, that's a great shot, when it's not. You want constructive criticism, but you also do need encouragement. Like sometimes it's like, that's a great shot. You know what I would do? I would just switch the angle, or I'd use a longer shutter speed, or have you ever thought of trying blur? Encouragement can be done right and it can be done wrong, and you don't want to crush people, I would say, at any point. Being kind is like the first tip. Do you know what I mean? Seth said legit community is important, and it really is. I think that, as I say, photography is a lonely occupation sometimes, particularly if you're a landscape photographer or a fine art photographer that doesn't necessarily work with other people a lot. And if you do it for fun, then most definitely find a group that you can go out with, or one other person that you can go out with and take pictures. I think that it's really, really lovely. And also, is another thing, if you're sort of slightly hesitant maybe about a certain type of photography, like I, for example, not super comfortable with portrait photography. If I'm doing it for an event, totally fine. The people know that I'm going to be taking their pictures. If I've got a model, totally fine with that, because they know I'm going to be taking their pictures. But if it's sort of like more of an impromptu street photography setting or something like that, I always have a bit of a hesitation. If you go out with other photographers who are happy to pose for you, or, are happy to kind of guide you because they do that stuff, and maybe you've got some other insights you can give to them when you go out, it's just super, super nice. Anyway, Roy said, when someone says you take great photos, you must have a great camera, don't hit them. This is a really good point. This happens so much. It's like, wow, what a great photo. What camera did you use? Like, I used a potato. It doesn't matter what camera I used. I took the photo. Yes, not getting violent is definitely a correct tip. Nigel said, do the GOW challenge. Yes. Architecture, and send it this month. So we will be rounding up our architecture submissions for next Friday's live stream. I can't believe I've talked to you for an hour. Wow, that flew by. So I will be with Con just going through all your submissions. If you haven't submitted your architecture challenge yet, send it to media@graysofwestminster.co.uk. Under 10 megabytes, include your name, some details of what you were shooting with. please do put your name, because otherwise we find it really hard to find people's emails when we're trying to read off the descriptions. But yeah, and send that over ideally by Thursday next week. I think once Thursday's cut off, Friday morning, we're going to be going through all the shots. So yeah. Terry points out that Nikon Owner Magazine groups are good for learning and meeting other like-minded photographers. The Nikon Owner groups are fantastic. The walks, most of the venues that they go to are often unpaid. Occasionally, if they're going to somewhere that you need to pay for entry, then you'll pay for entry. But sometimes they're just more generic walks. And they're so brilliant. The community of people there have really, really bonded, and they're always happy to welcome more. Everyone is super encouraging. It just... going to read that in a second, Magnus. It's just a really, really lovely sense of community. And we have so many different groups all over the country now. If you're in another country and you're a Nikon Owner subscriber and you think, hey, I want a regional group, well, we are always happy. Nikon Owner are very happy to hook you up with the other local photographers that are maybe in your area and try and set something up. So it's definitely part and parcel of the subscription. It's being part of that community. So yeah. All this camera talk, who needs a pint? Yeah, I don't drink. Coffee, a pint of coffee would be great. And as Magnus said, do authors get the questions, what great book you wrote? You must have a great typewriter. No, but you know what we do get asked a lot is, what software do you use for writing? Now, I'm just going to slightly go off the track here and just say, some authors will use a dedicated writing app like Scrivener, or they'll get one of those typewriter, like digital typewriter things that doesn't have a screen, so you're just typing and you don't get distracted. I basically use Word, or the Mac equivalent, which is Pages. I've written all my books in Pages and I've never had a problem with it. So, you know, it's whatever. Thank you, Seth, for joining. So later, got it. I'm sure it's getting hectic over there. Seth's got a lot going on. Please do make sure that you're checking out what he's doing. He's got an event coming up in like 11 days time or something. Can I read that? Nightspringer, I don't know if I can. Anyway, so yeah, definitely check out what Seth's up to, what Vahan is up to, what Matt's up to. We've got some fantastic channels here as well, and everyone's busy producing content for you, basically. I absolutely loved all of the tips and the advice that everyone's given today. Thank you so much. Baba's put the Australian Nikon Oz School as a recommendation if you want some help there. Obviously, Nikon School exists as well. We're always happy to chat photography at Grace, whether you're using Nikon or not. So you can always pop in, have a little look around and chat photography. I think almost all of us are photographers here. So, you know, we really, really do enjoy chatting about photography and what we're up to. Patrick just did the Nikon School. That's the UK and Nordics, because it's all one school. Mastering the Z8 with Rishi. Again, absolutely fantastic resource there for you. Thank you, everyone, for being here this afternoon. I'm going to toddle off and go and answer more emails and answer the phone and be on the shop floor. If you haven't liked the stream before you go, please do give it a like. We do have a video coming out this weekend. Can't remember which one it is, to be honest, so watch this space. It's going to be a surprise even to me. And then next week we've got the Nikon report. It might be a little bit later just because we've got bank holiday in the UK on Monday. So if you're in the UK, have a lovely bank holiday weekend. If you're anywhere in the world, have a lovely weekend anyway. Do some architecture photography, send us your submission, and we'll see you next week when there'll be both of us here. So thank you so much, and thank you for all your comments. Take care.